The issue of illicit cigarettes is said to be quite a contentious one in the country. The South African Revenue Services says it's even bigger than them. SARS Commissioner Kieswetter has told Parliament that they had to discontinue the track and trace project that is meant to clamp down on illicit tobacco trade. He says it did not address risks across the entire supply chain. We are joined for reaction by Sinenhlanhla of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association. I beg your pardon, Sinenhlanhla Mnguni. Mr. Mnguni, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So the track and trace system, perhaps just talk us through it and your reaction to this announcement that it had to be curtailed.
Look, I mean, the track and trace solution is something that we've always been in support of as the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association. Of course, we have stated categorically that it should always be independent of interference from the tobacco industry as per the provisions of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Now, the bigger multinationals have sought continuously to try and intervene in as far as this is concerned and try to implement a system which they have some sort of control over, or a system which they can pick and choose. And we are of the view that that is not correct. Of course, we agree with SARS that perhaps it may not be the correct or opportune moment at this stage to implement the track and trace, as it still needs to cater to covering the compliance risks along the tobacco industry value chain. And this is something that appears to be an issue. And up until that time, look, we will support whatever measures considered prudent in as far as SARS's quest for compliance with the tobacco industry.
Right. Back in September 2020, Mr. Kieswetter did indicate, that they are working on a new system. Are you privy to details of that system and how it works?
No, because our understanding is that the system had gone out to tender, so there were a number of service providers that had approached the Revenue Service, and I think the Revenue Service was still in the process of choosing one. The most common track and trace solution which is available globally is the tax stamp, of course, which is then affixed to a packet of cigarettes, which would then indicate whether the correct duties or excise taxes have been paid on that particular brand of cigarettes. And it's used in conjunction with technology, and one is able to verify using technology whether they have paid the requisite taxes in respect of that packet of cigarettes.
So back in 2020, when the lockdown started and we went into a heavier restriction, level 5 and level 3, and the banning of cigarettes for sale in public, you did come out extensively to say that this will boost the illicit trade. So I would like to get your thought in terms of what has happened since then, as well as what this means in terms of scrapping the track and trace system. Do we have an idea just how much illicit trade is on the market?
Look, we did caution the government and the relevant stakeholders prior to them implementing the tobacco ban. And of course, we were not, listened to or given an ear. And of course, what we're seeing now is that the criminal syndicates that were already entrenched in the criminal illicit trade have now strengthened their networks and resources and have become bigger than what was disclosed in the Newzroom Commissioner as far as the illicit trade in cigarettes is concerned. We're now seeing cigarettes coming from as far afield as China and Europe, and of course that shows that a lot of criminal syndicates are finding the South African cigarette market, and in particular the illicit trade, quite lucrative. And of course, as and when the South African Revenue Service and other law enforcement agencies adapt to the illicit trade, so too do these criminal syndicates. So it's a never-ending cycle where the criminal syndicates are forever adapting to the efforts of law enforcement to curb the illicit trade. At this stage, I think it is far bigger than it was pre-lockdown. We're also seeing a substantial rise in the smuggling of cigarettes through the borders of the Republic of South Africa, particularly through the Bright Bridge border post, which is between South Africa and Zimbabwe. But again, as I stated on, we're seeing far more brands coming through our borders from as far afield as China.
This illicit trade would not thrive without a market or demand. So it comes down to you and I at ground level. How do I even spot what an illicit cigarette is even?
Look, it's very difficult to spot what an illicit illicit cigarette is, because of course course, these cigarettes are made in factories that are legitimate and licensed. So it's very difficult for the consumer to spot what would constitute an illicit cigarette. One of the factors that many have looked at is price, but again, that is not always indicative of whether a cigarette is illicit or not, because we know that particularly in the informal trade, people who sell cigarettes and other fast-moving consumer goods sometimes employ tactics such as price averaging and loss leader to sell their products for cheaper and use another product to subsidize the sale of that particular product. So it is very difficult. I think as a starting point, one has to, especially the revenue service, would have to look at particularly the policing at the borders, because that's where a lot of these cigarettes which don't pay duties are smuggled through. And of course, those cigarettes, you would see them not having the requisite South African diamond stamp, and also sometimes having health warnings in languages other than English, which is what the South African cigarettes have in terms of their health warning.
At the height of this debate or conversation last year, a number of people who do not smoke were asking themselves, why should I care? I hear you talking about the illicit trade in cigarettes. What impact does it have on my life?
Look, I think revenue collection somehow has an impact on everyone in South Africa, because the less revenue the government collects, the more things such as taxes are raised, and the more the average citizen has to subsidize issues that are, or rather instances which are usually traditionally subsidized by our government. So the less revenue that is collected from the legitimate cigarette or tobacco trade, the more of those resources are pulled from other businesses, and of course that is used to then subsidize certain things that the average South African requires for their sustenance.
Thank you very much for helping us make sense of all of that. Sinenhlanhla Mnguni is the chairperson of the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association. Thank you, sir, for your time.